This is Jay Carper, and I'm continuing the series of A Sabbath to Yahweh, Part 2, Why Does the Sabbath Matter? In previous videos, I talked about how the Sabbath matters because it shows love and honor for God, how it matters because it's good for you, and how it matters because it's good for your whole community. In this video, I'm going to talk about why the Sabbath matters because it's all about God's relationship with His people. This is from Exodus chapter 31, verses 16 and 17. Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing it throughout their generations as a covenant forever, a sign forever between me and the people of Israel, that in 6 days YHWH made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day He rested and was refreshed. The seventh-day Sabbath is a separate covenant all on its own, not part of the covenant at Sinai or the covenant with Abraham. The weekly Sabbath is a covenant between God and His people Israel, that He made heaven and earth. It's an acknowledgement of God's role as the creator and judge of the whole universe. The weekly Sabbath is also one of the first signs of Israel's submission after they left Egypt. After they crossed the Red Sea, keeping the Sabbath was the very first commandment that God gave Israel, and He gave it as a test to see whether He would keep the rest of His commandments. In this passage, God also says that keeping the Sabbath is an acknowledgement of how He rested on the seventh day and was refreshed. But these are benefits that we get from keeping the Sabbath. So the seventh-day Sabbath, this covenant is also an agreement that we are to be a reflection of God in the world. We are supposed to emulate His behavior and rest on the seventh day. Leviticus 19:3 says, "Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and you shall keep my Sabbaths. I am YHWH, your God." God is our Heavenly Father, and in this verse, God connects honoring your mother and father with honoring Him by keeping the Sabbath. We are to keep the Sabbath because He is our Father, and He told us to. Fathers love their children. They create rules for their household, not to be arbitrary, not just to have rules, but because those rules are good for the people in the household. Fathers make rules for their children because those rules are in the best interests of their children. Children obey their father's rules because they honor their father. But Yahweh isn't just our Heavenly Father. He is our God. He is our Creator. You shall keep my Sabbaths, He says, because I, YHWH, are your God. And if He is our God, our Creator, our lawgiver, then we do what He says. Leviticus 26, verses 1 through 2 says, "You shall not make idols for yourselves, for I am YHWH, your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am YHWH." God connects keeping the Sabbath with not making idols. Refusing to keep the Sabbath is therefore tantamount to idolatry. We reverence God's sanctuary by avoiding the sanctuary of idols. But the Sabbath is a sanctuary in time. The tabernacle is a place that we go to be with God, to worship Him in the ways that He dictated. The seventh-day Sabbath is a time set apart for God's purposes. We set aside that day to worship God in the ways that He dictated, just like His physical sanctuary. The Sabbath was created for mankind, but it's about our relationship with God. It's a lot like marriage in that way. Marriage is a reflection of our relationship with God, but marriage was created for mankind. Remember what Jesus said about marriage. What God has joined together, let no man separate. But God set apart the Sabbath. He separated it from other days. And if we're not allowed to separate what God has joined, why do we think that we should join what God has separated? He told us over and over to keep the Sabbath day separate. And that's what we should do. So why does the Sabbath matter? The weekly Sabbath matters because it shows love for Yahweh your God. Because it's good for you. Because it shows love for your neighbor as yourself. And because it's a covenant dealing with God's relationship with his people. The seventh-day Sabbath matters to God, and it should matter to you and me too. This is Jake Harper from AmericanTorah.com and CommonSenseBibleStudy.com. Stick with me because we're not done talking about the Sabbath yet. In our next set of videos, we're going into part 3. Who is the Sabbath for? If you think the Sabbath is only for the Jews, or you think that Christians have a separate Sabbath, you really need to listen to these next videos.